Important Brexit news, guys, as Boris Johnson has probably just played one of the most daring political ploys in political history. Not just British political history, but political history in general. Now, why is this so significant? Why is this so important? Well, you see, it's all to do with Brexit, as you can guess by the title of this video. And what he's trying to do is to push Brexit through. He's trying to achieve what the electorate wants him to do, which is to remove the UK from the EU. However, there's been snags along the way. For example, governments that do not actually want to leave and doing everything in their power to make sure that when we do leave, we leave in inverted commas. We actually don't leave. We would just become a vassal without any say in how the EU is run whatsoever. And also, we have the opposition, the right honourable opposition no less, trying to do everything in their power to prevent Brexit from happening. And alongside them, the millions of stooges, the Remainers, the FBPEs or follow back pro-EU, as it's actually called, of the world, who are doing their very best to intimidate, to make it out that they are the majority of the country, to project their authoritarian tendencies onto the Brexiteers. All of this in a concerted effort to stop the democratic will of the majority of the country. Now, what is a proroguing of Parliament? Well, proroguing is basically just a delay of Parliament. Now, currently, Parliament hasn't actually sat yet for a while. They're currently having their Whitsun break, which is basically a British summer holiday in August. And while that happens, the MPs do whatever they need to do in their private lives, and then they reconvene after the Whitsun holiday in September, and then Parliament is prorogued again for the conference season, and then it's back to normal. But essentially what Boris Johnson wants to do is to prorogue it even further, to delay Parliament further, so that he has more time to push Brexit through, and also gives Remain less time to actually get together and form a coherent opposition to his Brexit plans. For you see, Boris Johnson has hit a bit of a snag recently. He at first, what it seems to me anyway, wanted a deal with the EU. However, once again, the EU has been adamant in saying that there will be no deal that is beneficial to the UK or to both parties. Only the deal that they've offered us, which is completely and utterly favourable to them. And everybody in Britain, unless they're an absolute EU stooge, agrees that this deal is terrible because it's one-sided. It is, as I again quote Yanis Varoufakis, a surrender document. And Theresa May's Chequers plan, which was to make this more palatable to the British public and Parliament, failed 3 times because it was just a surrender document and nobody wants a surrender document. So Boris Johnson, in his attempts, I assume he must have been talking to EU leaders and EU members in the Commission and other places like that. He's probably tried to say, look, this is what we want. This is beneficial to you and to us. Or maybe not. Maybe he wants a one-sided deal himself. Who knows? However, the end result is, it looks like the logical conclusion to all of this is no deal Brexit. And this has sent the Remainers and soft Brexiteers, as they're called, but they're not really Brexiteers, because otherwise they wouldn't really care how we get out, as long as we get out. But apparently they really don't want a no-deal Brexit. These people have been clamouring to prevent this, saying that Boris Johnson is trying to set up a coup to take over, that he's making a sham of democracy. So is it really a sham of democracy? Is this really, as what the Speaker of the House of Commons was saying, as he was crying, saying, oh, this is terrible, this is a constitutional nightmare and a crisis? Well, the sad fact of the matter is that this is completely legal. And in fact, the last major proroguing of Parliament wasn't in the 1600s, as people were comparing it to. For those of you who don't know, Charles I famously did that in the 1630s or 40s and prorogued it for 11 years, which resulted in the English Civil War. However, the most recent proroguing of any note was actually about, 2 years ago? And it was prorogued for 20 days. It's completely legal, and the Queen will always sign this off, because if she didn't, it would be a constitutional crisis. It's fine. It's completely legal. Well, I think trying to ignore the democratic will of people who voted a certain way is probably making democracy a sham. I mean, the fact that we didn't leave the EU at the allotted time a few months ago is apparently not a sham, but the government trying to actually get this to happen is apparently a sham. But okay, fair enough. You have your opinions, guys, but I have an idea of what a sham of democracy is. And they're trying to say that it's a coup, that he's trying to take over ultimate power by proroguing Parliament for just a couple of weeks. Well, pray tell, why is it that you guys have been consistently talking about setting up alternate cabinets. You know, the Green leader, Caroline Lucas, was talking about that, but making it all female, but all white at the same time. And recently, 200 MPs signed some kind of agreement. It's not even legal, it's not binding, they have no power anyway, to have this alternative parliament whilst the proroguing is in effect. So they would be debating and doing things which could not be possibly written into law. The intent is there, that is a parallel power. And I don't see how that's not trying to do some kind of coup, because at the very least, this government has some legitimacy. The issue is the type of Brexit. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, the Remainers have walked themselves into this, because it seemed to me that they don't know what they want when it comes to a deal. They have no idea what this deal would be, they don't know what this deal will mean for the UK or to the EU. They're all divided and nobody can give me a coherent answer. And they've had 3 years to come up with an alternative deal to no deal Brexit, and well, they haven't. And Boris Johnson has squished the time ever so much that they have even less time to decide. And if they couldn't figure it out in 3 years, they're not going to figure it out now. Essentially what the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and the SNP are trying to do is delay the inevitable. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to delay it so they can somehow come up with a mythical deal which none of them can agree on, and none of them can really agree on who should take over if they try and get this no confidence vote going, because they're trying to get rid of Boris Johnson so they can delay Brexit, to try and hopefully get some kind of second referendum, which was actually crushed in Parliament. Most of Parliament don't want a second referendum. I think most of the country in general doesn't actually want one. I think most people now just want it to be over and done with. They're desperately trying to delay it so that we don't leave, because they know that if they don't do this, we will leave. Unfortunately for them, they've played themselves more than Boris Johnson's actually played them, because in all their attempts to do all of this, they've not actually come up with any kind of solution, and I don't think a no confidence vote's actually going to happen anyway. I don't think they actually have the will in Parliament to do so. I would ignore anything that they say in regards to things about democracy and things about the people's vote and things like that, because it's just projection. Because it's one thing to project your own authoritarian tendencies onto another person or group of people, but then it's another to try and convince the country that this is the state of affairs, because most people can see that it's actually the opposite here. There's only ever been one side that has been trying its absolute best to overturn one result, and that's been the Remainers. And everybody knows, and this has been a tacit admission from both sides, that if Remain had won, the Brexit side would have respected the result, but the Remain side simply cannot. Everybody knows this. We've seen it on the media. That EU Supergirl was recently interviewed, and showing her complete lack of understanding of what democracy actually is, was basically saying that, yeah, she would continue to try and get the result any way she could, even if the country voted to continue to leave the EU, or something to that effect. This is what you guys asked for. This is what you guys played yourselves into, because you failed to actually offer anybody a solution or a deal that the EU would even possibly accept, even though they would not accept any deal. They do not want to concede anything. There can be no negotiations. What you see is what you'll get if we accept this deal. So it looks like really the only logical solution, the only logical outcome is no deal. You've played yourselves into a no deal Brexit, and you have nobody to blame but yourselves. In your attempts to stop Brexit, you've actually probably fast forwarded it. It's going to happen. So really what you guys should be doing is not trying to prevent it, because the train is set in motion now. It's on its way out of the station. The only thing you guys should really be discussing is life after it. You should be considering laws, policies, things like that. You should really be looking into the next few decades for the next referendum, if that is even needed. Because a truly democratic second referendum would be to wait a couple of decades to see what the outcome of this result would be, and then the British people would again decide their course for the future. And if it turns out to be a bad mistake and we were better off in, so be it. In the next couple of decades, we can vote and ask for re-entry. Whether we'll be accepted or not, I don't know, but a lot can change in 3 decades. But I think that's only fair, isn't it? We're not a direct democracy, we're not like Switzerland. Now, there's even been talk of abolishing the monarchy, but firstly, this is all but hot air. This is just hot air. None of these people actually want to abolish the monarchy. They're letting off steam, because they would be saying these opposite things if the Queen signed something or rejected Boris Johnson's proposals. They would be singing God Save the Queen in the streets in their protests. That's what they would be doing. But anyway, I think I'm getting on with myself, guys, so anyway, this is the Brexit news. I think it's going to happen now. I don't think there's any doubt. I don't think a deal's coming anytime soon. I don't think that Boris Johnson has anything that the EU could agree to, and I don't think the talent of his negotiators matters, because what do you do when you come up against an immovable object like the EU, who just refuse to negotiate and to compromise? They don't want to compromise, and if you can't compromise with somebody, you might as well just leave them alone. So I guess, really, that's it. Get used to it, guys. You've walked right into a trap, and now you're digging your holes deeper, and well, everybody else will just ignore you and step over this hole. Till next time, guys, I'll see you later.